There is a number printed on an ordinary grocery receipt that will tell you more about the true health of the United States dollar than anything the Federal Reserve will announce this month. It is not on the news. No anchor is reading it out over dramatic music. It is sitting quietly at the bottom of a receipt in a kitchen drawer, next to a bag of coffee that cost $9.61 a pound, when the same bag cost noticeably less a year ago. And the reason it costs more is not really about coffee at all. It is about something that happened to the dollar in your pocket this year, something that has not happened with this severity since Richard Nixon sat in the White House, and something that is quietly reaching into the savings of every single person watching this video, whether you own a single ounce of gold or not. I want to walk you through it carefully without hype, because this is a subject the fear merchants love to scream about, and almost nobody explains honestly. By the end, you're going to understand exactly what happened to the dollar in the first half of this year, why it is the worst first half in more than 50 years, why the money sitting safely in your bank account may be quietly losing value, even though the number on the statement never changes, and what history says people in your position should actually understand about it. Stay with me, because the coffee receipt and the currency chart and the balance in your savings account are all the same story, and I am going to connect them. Before we go further, I want to know who is here. Tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from, and tell me honestly where you keep the bulk of your savings right now. Mostly in cash and the bank, mostly in stocks, in gold or silver, spread around. I ask because the answer to that question determines how much this particular story affects you. And the mix of answers across thousands of you tells me something about how widely this has been understood, which so far, I suspect, is not very widely at all. Put it below. We will come back to what it means. Let me start with the plain fact, and it is a genuinely startling one. In the first 6 months of this stretch we are living through, the US dollar, measured against a basket of the world's other major currencies, fell by roughly 11%. That is its worst first half performance in more than 50 years. To find a 6-month decline that's steep, you have to go all the way back to 1973, to the years right after the dollar was cut loose from gold entirely. More than half a century, and the dollar had never fallen this hard, this fast. In the first half of a year, until now. Now, I need to slow down here, because the phrase the dollar fell means almost nothing to most people, and the people who use it rarely explain what it actually refers to. It does not mean the number in your wallet changed. A $100 bill is still a $100 bill. What it means is that the dollar buys less of everything the rest of the world produces, and increasingly less of what you produce too. When economists say the dollar fell 11% against other currencies, they are describing, in the driest possible language, a reduction in the purchasing power of the money you hold. And purchasing power is the only thing about money that has ever mattered. A dollar is not valuable because of the paper. It is valuable because of what it can be exchanged for. When that shrinks, you have quietly become poorer, even if every number you can see stayed exactly the same. This is where the coffee comes in. And I use coffee deliberately because it is the most ordinary thing I can think of. When the dollar weakens against other currencies, everything the United States imports gets more expensive because it now takes more dollars to buy the same goods from abroad. Coffee is imported. So is a great deal of what fills a grocery cart and a hardware store and a pharmacy. Over the past year, import prices climbed at their fastest annual pace in over a year, and the price of ground coffee rose to that $9.61 a pound, part of a broader jump of nearly a fifth in the cost of coffee alone. The dollar falling on a chart in a trading room in London, and the coffee costing more in your kitchen are not two stories. They are one story, and the receipt is where you actually see it. Here is the part that matters most, and I want you to hold on to it, because everything else connects back to it. This process has a name that economists use, and it is a good one. They call it a hidden tax. When a government taxes you directly, you see it. There is a line on a form. You feel the money leave, but when the currency itself loses value, the effect is identical. Your money buys less. You are poorer, and yet there is no form, no line, no vote, no announcement. The money simply does less than it used to. It is the quietest way in the world to reduce what people own. And it is quiet precisely because the number on the bank statement never moves. That stillness is the disguise. Now let me tell you why this is happening. Because the reasons matter and they are not mysterious. A currency's strength rests, in the end, on confidence. Confidence that the country issuing it will manage its finances responsibly, that its institutions are stable and predictable, and that holding its money is a safe place to store value. Several of those pillars have been under visible strain. There has been enormous uncertainty around trade policy and tariffs, which has made global investors less certain about the United States as a place to park money. There have been public questions about the independence of the Federal Reserve, which unsettles the very people whose confidence holds the currency up. And underneath all of it sits a government carrying a debt load that grows every year, financed by issuing more and more dollars into the world. When you increase the supply of anything, while confidence in it wavers, its value tends to fall. That is not a conspiracy. It is the oldest rule in monetary history, and it is playing out on schedule. And there is a deeper reason. A government in this position rarely fights currency weakness as hard as you might expect. One worth understanding because it explains why this pressure tends to persist rather than pass quickly. A country carrying an enormous debt has a quiet, almost unspoken incentive to let its currency lose value gently over time, because debts are fixed in dollar terms, and a dollar that buys less is a dollar that is easier to repay. If you owe a fixed number of dollars, and each of those dollars becomes worth a little less every year, the real weight of that debt slowly shrinks without anyone ever having to pass a painful law to raise taxes or cut spending. Economists have a phrase for this quiet arrangement, and it is one you will hear more of in the years ahead, in which a currency is allowed to erode just enough that the burden of the national debt is silently transferred year by year from the government to the people holding the currency. That is not an accusation of some secret plot. It is simply the incentive structure sitting underneath the whole system. And it is why, when a currency starts to slide under the weight of debt, the slide often continues longer than the optimists expect. The people who hold the most cash are, in effect, the ones quietly paying down a debt they never personally borrowed. And here is a piece of this that almost nobody watching the coffee price ever connects to it, though it is the same story told from a great height. The people who manage money for a living at the largest scale, the central banks and sovereign investors of other nations, watch the dollar's purchasing power far more closely than any of us watch our grocery receipts. And they have been responding to exactly what we have been describing. For years, these institutions have been steadily reducing how much of their reserves they hold in dollars and moving toward assets that cannot be printed or debased by any single government's decision. They are not doing this out of hostility. They are doing it for precisely the reason. Ingrid, whom I will introduce you to shortly, protects her own savings because a rational holder of wealth, when the currency they hold is measurably losing value, looks for somewhere that value is better preserved. When you see that the most sophisticated money managers on earth have quietly been diversifying away from an over-reliance on the dollar, you are seeing the professional version of the very same instinct that should be forming in the back of your own mind as you read that receipt. The scale is different. The logic is identical. If you are finding this useful, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, because the second half is where I show you the last time this happened, in the 1,970 seconds, and what it did to the people who kept their savings in the safest possible place and thought they were being responsible. That history is the most important part of this entire video, and it changes how you should read everything I have just told you, because to really understand this moment, you have to go back to where the 11% number pointed us to 1973, and to the decade that followed, which is the last time Americans watched their currency lose value in a sustained and frightening way. And the story of that decade is not really about the people who took wild risks. It is about the people who did what everyone told them was the safe and sensible thing and were punished for it anyway. That is the part almost nobody tells you. And it is the part you most need to hear. In August of 1971, President Nixon severed the last link between the dollar and gold. And for the first time in the nation's history, the dollar was backed by nothing but confidence and the word of the government. What followed through the 1,970 seconds was a decade of high inflation, a period when the dollar lost purchasing power year after year after year. And here is the cruel mechanics of it. The part that matters for you. The people who suffered the most were not the reckless. They were the cautious. They were the savers. They were the retirees who had done everything right, who had put their money in the bank and in safe, fixed savings, exactly as a lifetime of prudent advice had told them to, and who then watched helplessly as the purchasing power of those savings was eaten alive by a currency losing value faster than their safe interest could replace. Someone who retired in 1970 with what looked like a comfortable, sensible nest egg of cash and bonds could watch a large share of its real buying power simply evaporate over that decade without a single number in their account ever going down. The statement said they still had their money. The grocery store said otherwise. That is the lesson of the 1,970 seconds. And it is a brutal one. And it is the exact opposite of what most people assume. In a period of currency debasement, cash is not automatically safe. It can be one of the most dangerous places to be precisely because it feels the safest. The danger is invisible. It does not arrive as a crash. You can see on the news. It arrives as a slow, silent leak. And the very stillness of the bank balance is what keeps people from noticing until years of purchasing power are gone. Let me make this real with two people. Neither is real. Both are the kind of person you probably know. Harold is 71, and he is careful by nature, the way a lot of people who lived through hard times are careful. When markets get frightening, Harold does what feels responsible. He moves to cash. He keeps the bulk of his savings in the bank and in short-term savings, where the number can never fall, where there is no risk of a crash wiping out what he worked for. And Harold feels safe, because every month the statement shows the same comforting number, unchanged solid his. What Harold does not see, because it is designed to be invisible, is that while the dollar slid this year, the real buying power of that comforting number quietly shrank. His grocery bill rose. His insurance rose. The coffee rose. The number held perfectly still, while the value beneath it bled out. And because the number held still, Harold never felt the danger. He is being taxed silently, and he will not see it on any statement, only in the growing gap between what his money used to cover and what it covers now. Ingrid is 66, and she is not braver than Harold, and she is not smarter about markets. She simply understood one thing that Harold did not. She understood that safe is not the same as stable, that a number that never falls can still be losing value, and that the real job is not to protect the number, but to protect the purchasing power. So Ingrid did not do anything dramatic. She did not bet the house on anything. She simply made sure that not every dollar she owned was sitting in the one place most exposed to a falling currency. She kept some cash, of course, because you need cash. But she also held a portion of her savings in things that tend to hold their value when the dollar loses its spread sensibly, without drama, as a form of insurance rather than a gamble. When the dollar fell 11%, Ingrid did not panic, because a part of her savings was designed for exactly this weather. The difference between Harold and Ingrid is not courage, and it is not genius. It is that one of them understood what money actually is, and one of them trusted the number on the statement. Now, why do so many careful, intelligent people make Harold's mistake? Why does the human mind so reliably mistake the still number for safety? The answer is one of the most well-documented quirks in all of economics. And understanding it is genuinely the most useful thing I can give you today. Because once you can see it, you cannot be fooled by it as easily. Economists call it money illusion. It is the deeply rooted human tendency to think about money in terms of its face value, the number printed on it, rather than its real value, what it can actually buy. Our minds are wired to see $1,000 as $1,000 a fixed and solid thing, and to feel that as long as that number is intact, our wealth is intact. But the number is not the wealth. The number is just a label. The wealth is the purchasing power behind it. And that can shrink dramatically while the label stays the same. Money illusion is why a person can feel perfectly secure watching an unchanged bank balance during a period when that balance is quietly losing a tenth of its real value. The mind is soothed by the stable number and blind to the shrinking substance behind it. It is not stupidity. Every one of us has this wiring. It is why currency debasement is such an effective and such a quiet way to reduce what people own, because it hides inside a cognitive blind spot that nearly all human beings share. The people who navigate a falling currency well are simply the ones who have trained themselves to think in real terms instead of face value, to ask not how many dollars do I have, but what can those dollars actually buy? And is that amount growing or shrinking? That single shift in the question is most of the battle. Let me be careful and honest here, because I am not in the business of frightening you. And the fear peddlers on this subject deserve none of your trust. The dollar falling 11% in half a year is serious, and it is historically unusual. But it is not the end of the dollar, and anyone who tells you the currency is about to collapse entirely is selling you something. In fact, many serious analysts expect the dollar to stabilize and even recover some ground later in this cycle, because these things move in waves, not straight lines, and the dollar remains, by a wide margin, the world's dominant currency. There is no serious replacement waiting to take its throne. This is not a collapse. It is a decline, a meaningful one, within a system that is still standing. Holding both of those truths at once, that this is real and serious, and that it is not the apocalypse, is exactly the calm, clear-headed position. That the fear merchants on one side and the nothing to see here crowd on the other both want to pull you away from. So let us bring it all together, and let us go back to that coffee receipt where we started. We have established that the dollar fell roughly 11% in the first half of this year. Its worst such performance since 1973, driven by strain on the confidence that holds any currency up. We have established that a falling currency is a hidden tax, that it reduces what your money can buy with no vote and no announcement, and that you see it not on your bank statement but on your grocery receipt. We have established that the last time this happened in earnest, in the 1,970 seconds, the people hurt worst were not the reckless, but the cautious savers who kept everything in cash and watched its purchasing power quietly disappear. And we have established that the reason this danger is so effective is money illusion. The deep human tendency to trust the unchanging number and never notice the shrinking value behind it. Here is what I want you to carry away, framed as honestly as I can. The safest feeling place for your money, cash sitting still in the bank, is not automatically the safest place for your money. And in a period of currency debasement, it can quietly be one of the riskiest precisely because the risk is invisible and feels like prudence. This does not mean you should abandon cash because you need cash. And having accessible savings is genuinely important. It means the goal is not to protect the number. The goal is to protect what the number can buy. And that requires making sure you are not 100% exposed to a single currency. That is, right now, measurably losing value. What the specific mix should be depends entirely on your own circumstances. And I am not here to tell you the answer, only to make sure you are asking the right question. Do not let anyone use this 11% to panic you into a scheme or a product, because they will try and they will get louder as this continues. And equally, do not let the comforting stillness of your bank statement lull you into believing that a number that never falls is a value that never falls. Those are different things. And the entire quiet danger of this moment lives in the gap between them. None of this is financial advice. And every figure I have cited, the 11%, the worst since 1973, the coffee price, the import numbers, is in the pinned comments so you can verify it yourself rather than take my word for it. I open by telling you there is a number on an ordinary grocery receipt that reveals more about the dollar than anything the Federal Reserve will say this month. Now you know what it is and why it moved and what it is quietly doing to the money you thought was sitting safely still. The number on your bank statement has not changed. That is exactly what should get your attention because the value behind it has, and the distance between those two facts is the whole story the receipt was trying to tell you.